Welcome to Broadcast to Badass by Best Life Ever with your hosts, Kimi and Pua. If you're ready to stop struggling, stop hustling, and start living your best life ever, you are in the right place. Today, we have an interview with Jeremy Slate, whose mission is to help entrepreneurs, business people, and artists create a life on their own terms.
Jeremy started the Create Your Own Life podcast in late 2015. He was struggling as an entrepreneur, but due to hard work and determination, his life very quickly took off. In addition to interviewing many of the people he admires most, he runs Command Your Brand and Slate Media Productions. Without further ado, let's welcome Jeremy to the podcast.
Welcome, Jeremy, to the podcast. So great to have you with us today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked to hang out with you and add some value to your audience.
Awesome. Well, let's kick things off right away. Can you just share a little bit with our audience who you are and what you do in the world?
Wow, I feel like that's a loaded question.
Right?
No pressure.
I'm been married for a couple of years now. I have 2 dogs and a miniature pig. And
oh my gosh, you're kidding.
No, I'm not.
This is Pua's dream.
That is my dream. Yes. Tell me everything about your pig. And I have a question. Do you eat pork?
We just don't tell him, but of course I have bacon. Yeah, he's awesome. He's like 40 pounds. He's a couch potato. He likes to. They're the cuddliest animals in the entire world, and you wouldn't expect it. Like,
oh my gosh.
Like he loves blankets, pillows, fluffy things, and he's a pig.
Wait, what's his name?
Remington.
Oh my God, that's so awesome.
My wife wanted an Old English name, so we were between Wellington and Remington, so that kind of worked for me.
Perfect.
Okay, forget everything else. We're just going to talk about this pig.
Oh my gosh.
We'll save it for another episode, but it's happening.
He loves everything and he eats everything. He's great.
Oh man. That is awesome. We're going to have to see some photos.
I'll totally send you some photos. He's awesome. He's only like 40 pounds and he's almost 3 years old. So he's like full grown.
Wow. All right. Well, that just makes it more real for you, Pua. It can happen.
It's happening.
You know,
all right.
Piglet is a way of life is what we like to say, right? So anyway, I have 2 dogs. We have a toy poodle and we have a border collie / corgi. And we also have the pig. I'm a former competitive powerlifter. I've pulled an 80,000 pound army tank before. That was kind of cool. And my background is I actually went into education because I studied at Oxford University, got my master's from Seton Hall. And I was like, wow, what am I doing here? So I did that for a couple years. And then eventually I got into network marketing, then digital marketing, then selling products on Amazon. And that kind of led me to like podcasting and everything else I'll do now. We have a firm called Command Your Brand Media, which helps people get booked on top rated podcasts. And then also I have my podcast, which is Create Your Own Life.
Awesome. Wow.
We can't see each other, and we're pretty good. We go back and forth pretty well, but every once in a while we get in this like, is it you? Is it me? Is it you? Is it me?
Oh, it's so funny. I've had a co-host before, which is always interesting because I feel like I'm playing producer at the same time, and like you're running messenger back and forth. Like, all right, you talk now, and you're trying to like not hit the keys too hard, so nobody you're typing.
I know we've gotten really proficient at muting ourselves. Mute, type, unmute. Mute, type, unmute. It's a little background for those of you who are listening and wondering how we sound so seamless. It's quite a production, but it works. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. We as you know, we kind of stalked you before this interview, and we're so fascinated by your story. And you have a really interesting, unique story about how you got to this place and how you became an entrepreneur. And if you're comfortable sharing, I mean, you had some pretty gnarly experiences that maybe woke you up to what you really wanted to do with your life. Would you mind sharing some of that with us?
Well, it's funny because I think the first one, like for a lot of people, it would change their life, but for me, it didn't like really do anything to me. Like I didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I'm like, hey, I'll just be a teacher. That just sounds great. I'm a professional student at this point, so why not teach other people? It's definitely not the same at all. At 19, I was playing football, and we were just idiots about it too. Like it was a pickup game on the weekend, and we would just tackle the heck out of each other with no pads or anything. So it was just crazy. I tore 3 major ligaments in my knee and had what was supposed to be an easy surgery, but they actually messed up my anesthesia. And I, got put on like a breathing tube and all this other stuff. And I spent 3 days in the hospital and actually even got last rites that they really just didn't know what was happening to me. And all of a sudden, 3 days in, just started breathing again. They couldn't really explain it. And for a lot of people, I think this whole it was weird. I was like in and out of my body, like this whole experience of like what people call, like a near death experience. And it was really weird. And for a lot of people, I think that would have changed their life and been like, oh my gosh, the heavens have opened up and I'm gonna blah. For me, it was like, cool. Okay. I want to get my Taylor ham sandwich. That would be great. And then, I just kind of went on with life as usual. Then I studied at New College, Oxford. Then I came back to Seton Hall and got my master's in, it used to be called classics, but now they just call it ancient history. Taught at a private school for a bit, and you don't really make much at a private school. Since I didn't have a teaching certificate, I couldn't go teach at a public school where you make decent money. And at that same time, my mom actually ended up having a pretty severe stroke, and that kind of just rocked the bedrock of my life because my mom was like a very powerful person. I guess not powerful, but very strong personality in my life. So it's really rough when that happens. So I was kind of like, wow, okay, what do I do now? Like, is this really what I want to be doing? And my wife was approached about a network marketing opportunity, which I hadn't seen before. So I saw this presentation. I was like, dude, like $1 million tomorrow. This is going to be great. Didn't work like that. And I did that for a few years, was decently successful at that. But it was also at the same time very stressful for me because, you don't really only have to run a business, but you kind of have to be a life coach at the same time. And I went from there into selling life insurance. And then I ended up private labeling and selling products on Amazon before I eventually was just like, forget about it. And I ended up doing content marketing for a friend's marketing business, and I was pretty darn good at it. And while I was there, I started a podcast called Create Your Own Life, which really went into everything else I do. And it was funny because I think the only reason I was able to create that is because I wasn't depending on it for income, if that makes sense. Like I was able to actually look at it as an art form. And then that kind of led to a lot of success I didn't expect. I interviewed almost 400 people I really admired, closing in on 1 million downloads. I've been featured in Forbes, Inc., named a top podcast to follow, top influencer to follow, all this stuff. I'm like, wow, how the heck did that happen? And that led me into creating our current business, which is Command Your Brand Media. It's like a new media PR firm dealing mainly with podcasting.
That's an epic journey. Wow. So cool. Well, we're fascinated, of course, with podcast origin stories, and just entrepreneurial origin stories. And it's so interesting how all the pieces in your life and your journey have brought you to where you are right now. Can you, and I love what you said about how you went into podcasting without really having any intent for it to be anything other than an art form. And yet that's the thing, right, that took off versus the thing that you thought would get you $1 million tomorrow. And we hear that so often with entrepreneurs that kind of finally find their thing. It was the thing that they weren't expecting. But can you share a little bit more in detail about what inspired you to start a podcast and why a podcast? And I also just so fascinated with all the interviews that you had and how did you approach people? Was that out of your comfort zone? So sorry, I know there's a lot there, but
no worries. No worries. Sure. So I guess let's take this back to when I really screwed it up. I had a podcast.
Love those stories.
I spent a month living in Peru in 2015 for Rotary International, which was really cool. It was kind of interesting. You have to learn to speak Spanish very quickly or you don't get to eat and go to the bathroom and interesting things like that. So I was there and I was kind of looking at wow, I've tried so many things. I'm getting married in a few months. What do I really want to do with my life? And I'm like, you know what? I've listened to podcasts since 2004, when you actually really had to be committed to them to find them. I've listened to this one podcast called No Agenda. They just kind of make fun of the news. It's hilarious forever. And I was like, you know what? I think I could do that. So I decided I was going to start a podcast and I was going to be a life coach and I was going to do all this stuff. And it was called Rock Your Life. The graphics actually still out there on Google if you really motivated to go out there and find it. It's hilarious. It looks like it was made by a third grader. And it was really bad because I was like trying to give people all this information that I had no idea on. I wasn't an expert. It wasn't very good. And I think in like maybe in 2 months that I actually did it, I had maybe 100 downloads. It just like wasn't very good. So I ended up quitting that, and I just dropped it, and I was like, yeah, whatever. And got married in September of 2015, and then I was kind of like, well, what do I really want to do? I'm like, let's give this podcasting thing a shot again. So I actually took a course on like how to start a podcast because I just made this decision I was going to be professional at it, because I find that being a professional in anything you do is just really important to do. So I learned a lot about it. I learned about the tech of it. I learned about, the importance of what it should look like, the structure of it. And I was like, wow, okay, cool. I can actually approach this and have some control over what I'm doing here. So the name of the show actually comes from a conversation I had with my dad, like right after I quit my teaching job. Like quitting your teaching job on a whim and going into network marketing. I don't know if you want to tell your parents about that one. So my dad goes, what are you doing? I'm like, well, Dad, I want to create my own life. And he goes, good luck with that. And that's where the idea of that show came from. And it took a little bit to settle on that, because that happened in 2013. And I was like, you know what? I'm really going to do something cool. I want to create life on my own terms. I want to help people do that as well. So as you can see from this second trying at a podcast versus the first, even the goal was different, right? Like the first one was, I'm going to make money and I'm going to build this thing. Second time around is, how can I help people? And who would I want to learn from? So I made a list of the top 100 people I most admired, and I wrote them 100 individual emails like that were like geared towards them, and got a lot of them to respond to me and say, hey, let's do it. And I was actually like really surprised. The first person to respond to me, though we didn't do the interview, was Seth Godin. And I'm like, wow, that's really cool. This is Seth Godin is emailing me. So it was like this thing of, first of all, getting over the idea of how unbelievable it is that people could actually respond to me. And then second of all, I had to realize, oh, now I have to sit on Skype with these people and somehow manage to run an interview. That in itself was interesting. I don't know if you ladies experienced that when you first started, was like, how do I run an interview? When I first got started, I was just like, I was nervous as anything. I had like a list of like 30 questions. It was kind of like a jail cell interrogation. So it was really rough. And I feel like I didn't feel like I became a good interviewer until about 200 episodes. Like it kind of took like that long for me to really feel like I could run it. And now I have very little prep. I have a bio and kind of an idea of where I want it to go. And I just have some of the most amazing conversations with people because I just kind of show up with it without preconceived notions, without scripted questions that just feel scripted. And we get some incredible things out of our guests that way.
That is epic. We have a really parallel podcasting history. Yeah. We also had a first podcast that was super fun and a very humongous learning experience. I'll leave it at that. We loved it. And it's really, as you said, it's kind of how we created the brand that we have now and the podcast that we have now. So without that first podcast, we wouldn't be here. So, we are so grateful in that way. But yeah, it's so funny. I was listening to you talk and I was like, what? We did that. Oh my God, we did that too. We just met our male half. But I love that you really were open to reinvention and just the energy of letting things come. Like whatever will come, right? And that we experience the same thing where now we just kind of follow the conversation, follow our intuition, and have some of the best conversations, right?
Yeah, because I feel like it's weird when you come into it with all this like preconceived, like what we're going to talk about and do and everything else. And it's just so much more authentic when you just show up and have a conversation with somebody, because I'll have my little pad next to me and I hear somebody make an important point, so I'll write it down. Because here's the weird thing. When you're trying to remember that next question the whole time, you stop listening. Mm-hmm. So I write it down, wait for them to stop, and I say, hey, you mentioned, blah, blah, blah. Let's go back and take another look at that. I'd really love to like chat about what happened there. And because of that, I just feel like we have some impactful conversations where if you show up to it totally scripted, you're just never going to cover those things. Does that make sense? Like I interviewed a guy the other day named John Vroman. that has a company called the Front Row Foundation, where they actually put kids in the front row if they have a life-threatening illness at their favorite event. And we actually went through this entire thing, and we just had such an amazing conversation because I picked up on different things in his story that if I had a full script, never would have happened. And it went a totally different way than I expected it to.
It's awesome. That's so epic. Well, we're so intrigued by people who take podcasts. And by the way, the fact that you called your podcast an art form, and it really was born out of your passion and your heart. And that's what, like, as Kimi said, that's what catapulted this whole thing forward. That's really it really spoke to me in a really beautiful way. So thank you for sharing that. And we would love for you to share with our audience, because we actually just sort of went through a little bit of a brand shift ourselves. We went from focusing on kind of corporate coaching and time and energy management coaching in corporations to supporting entrepreneurs. And one of the most epic things you can do as an entrepreneur, especially if you love to talk and you love to interview people, is having a podcast. And you've done such an amazing job at using your podcast to really solidify your brand. And I was hoping you would share a little bit with our audience about what that process looked like for you and what advice you have for anyone looking to do the same thing.
Well, here's the one thing that people don't realize that I've kind of had in my back pocket the whole time is my wife is actually a PR. So anytime that I have a question, I just say, "Hey, honey, what do I need to know?" so I've kind of had that going the whole time for me. I don't want to say that, I'm like this like branding genius or something like that. I've learned a lot of it by doing, but also having the right people around me, like my wife and a couple other people that I can ask, like, "Hey, what should I do with this?" And I think that's kind of like just something to realize at first as well, is having the right people to ask what's going on. So I learned a lot of basic concepts about, like, what is positioning, which was, as a podcaster, something we benefit a lot off of, right? We interview cool people and we get positioning. What that means is when you're seen next to that person, being if they're a celebrity or whatever, your own brand starts to rise a bit and your own following starts to grow a little bit. And it changes the perception of who you are and what you're doing. So I've learned a lot from, things like that and getting a lot of these basic things in. And it comes down to really having the basics in and building out from there. So what that means is having your website look professional, having the copy written in third person, so it sounds like somebody else wrote it about you, so you sound like you're important. Having a media page on your website where you store any press or any podcast interviews or anything that you do, because if media reaches out to look for you, you want to look important. It's also having a speaker one sheet in your website, because anytime that they're going to look at you for an interview, they're going to want to see quickly your bio, your social links, and your speaking topics. So like there's a lot of these basic things you should have on your website when you get started, and it just helps you with this entire process. And then from there, you kind of look, for me, I call it like the small pond theory, right? We all have a small pond. For me, it was this small local newspaper that I can basically send them anything and they'll run it. But for any of us, it could be like your university. It could be a Rotary Club. It could be some small store circular, or like I mentioned, I have a weekly newspaper that gets sent out in the mail to everybody in the county. So it's something where you can get started and use that as like a starter piece to get it going. And that is really, where you kind of go from there, and you use that to build up to more and more and more pieces of press. So for me, it started out with getting podcasts, getting small press, then building up to getting into Forbes and Inc. and a lot of these different things, but you have to build a portfolio. That's like really, really important to do. And that's how you kind of grow from there. And since I was doing all this stuff at the same time as doing a podcast and being in media, it was a lot easier to build this.
Wow. Awesome. Having a wife in PR. She sounds amazing. And so do you guys work together too? Because that is such great guidance and support that sounds like she's given you. And those are great tips for our audience too. Do you guys work together now in your Command Your Brand?
Yeah, we're co-founders in Command Your Brand Media, and we started together with me being a podcaster and her being someone in PR. So it's kind of this interesting meld of my expertise in interviewing and her expertise on like, what do you do with it? And we've started bringing on like salespeople for that. We have our client manager, Brooke, who is awesome. So we have like a really great team of people that we've built around that. And it's just been really awesome that I'm able to do that with my wife.
Yes. Total power team. Love it. Wow. You know, you talk a lot about service. I've heard you mention that word quite a few times, and, you know, in everything that you do, and especially with Create Your Own Life podcast, how you began that journey with the mindset of how can you help people and how can you learn, right? And share what you learn with others to help them grow. Can you talk a little bit more about how you want to serve people in the world? Like, what is your personal mission? And I read somewhere that you said something about helping people to create a life on their own terms. So what does that mean to you?
I think, well, because if you look at it, right, like I took the quote unquote traditional route, which was higher education, more higher education, and more higher education. And I'm not doing any of it. So I really think it's deciding what you want to do and getting good at that and deciding how you can make money off that. Because it's one thing to be an artist, and that's awesome, but you also don't want to be the starving artist. Like, you need to find out how you can get more out of that. So for me, it was, okay, I'm going to build a podcast, but now how can I build value into this model so that I can make money? So there's a lot of different ways people can do that. But for me, it was podcasting. So really, we want to figure out, like, who are the people that didn't do it the exact same way as everybody else? Like, how are, you know, these different people that creating success on a high level, like, what did it look like? Because I feel like there's so many people that just didn't do it that way. You know what I mean? Like, they took the way you're quote unquote supposed to do it and it didn't work out. I took the way you're supposed to do it and it didn't work out. So I like to talk to people like that. And I like to talk to people that really are looking to create success on a high level, but didn't do it the way everybody else did.
Love that.
We're like the same person. Out.
You're speaking our language.
Yes, preach, brother, preach.
I love it.
Okay, so yes to all of that. Amen. Totally agree. I mean, and I think what's really awesome about what you're doing and the space that we're all in is that we are kind of creating this revolution. It's almost like we're opening people up and waking them up to the idea that, you know, college and graduate school and all that route, climbing the corporate ladder, is one way that works for people, but it's one way of many. And more people are kind of coming out of the woodwork saying, oh, I know something felt a little funny about that. I'm so glad that we have this to reassure us that we're wanting to change directions and that's okay. So thank you for that. That's really, really epic.
Well, and I think that's true. And like, there is a place for it. I'm not going to say, like, I'm not going to bash college, because yeah, if somebody's operating on me, I really hope they have an MD. But there's just certain things that you just don't need it for, you know?
For sure. Absolutely. And I mean, the experience, you know, we went, so we can't just say that it was a waste of our time. So, you know, we learned a lot and the experiences were great, but super grateful to have this kind of elevated way of thinking, to know that there are definitely other ways to go. So if somebody is looking to shift from that 9-to-5 life to creating a life on their own terms and following what's speaking to their heart, what's something that you tell people who are just on the cusp of starting to do their own thing, but they aren't really sure what that first step is, or they have a little bit of fear in taking that first step?
Well, I think it's interesting because I feel like what I tell people to do is very different than what a lot of people tell others to do. Because I say have a job first. You know what I mean? Like, have something where you're going to make money, because you make really crappy decisions when you're worried about, you know, where your next meal is going to come from. Like, I feel like you make a lot of really bad decisions. So the thing I always recommend is that people check out the book by Cal Newport called So Good They Can't Ignore You. And Cal talks about this idea of finding something you're good at and getting so darn good at it that you become passionate. Like, that's how you generate passion. And it's really a different viewpoint on it, right? Like, finding something you're good at, getting even better and better and better at it. And then when it gets easy and it gets fun, you get passionate. And that's what I think people should really look at. Like, what are you good at? How can you get better at that? How can you perfect that skill? But also, not wasting your lunch money at the same time. Because I think starting something as a side hustle is really the best way to do it.
Awesome.
Cool. So we're so fascinated with people's, especially creative entrepreneurs, what their lifestyle and habits are like and routines. And certainly I'm sure in 400 interviews too, you've been inspired by some of the routines and habits of the people you've interviewed as well. Can you share with us maybe what a typical day looks like for you?
Yeah, I'm not a super early riser. Like, I'm up at 7 a.m. Usually go to the gym, which is just down the street. And, then I get back here and start working. We work from the house. I have an employee that comes and works here a couple days a week. And that's pretty much how it is. I'm on a lot of Skype calls. I'm on a lot of phone calls. I'm always creating a lot of content. So that's really what it looks like. And podcaster by me, the interviews I do are only done every other Friday. Because I've kind of managed to create all my content in bunches. And it's whatever major project I'm working on at the time. So right now we're building out a course, and a lot of my time is spent creating the pieces for that and filming the videos and doing all that. So really a lot of what I do is more project driven, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. What's your course about?
We're actually teaching people how to get on podcasts, because I feel like with what we do as a company of helping people do that, there's a level of entrepreneur we want to service one-on-one, but we can't do that with everyone, if that makes sense. So we're creating another way to help people still be able to use that type of service, but not work with us one-on-one.
Got it.
Dude,
smart.
You're us. So that was the brand shift that we just went through. So we now have an online course that we are currently building, and it's helping entrepreneurs to create an online presence, a course, a membership site, so that they can free up their time while they continue to serve. My mind is blown. That's really awesome. Okay, so without giving away too much, could you give us a little teaser on what's one amazing thing that you're going to teach in your course and that people are going to be like, what? Okay, I need to sign up. I got to know more.
Well, the first thing was we kind of already went over that, was what to do with your website and stuff like that, because you got to have the basics in before you're going to approach anybody. And then we also look at, how should you be prepping, what she should be talking about in those episodes. So we kind of have this thing we're always talking about called story, message, call to action. These 3 elements that have to line up. What's your personal story? What's the thing you teach? And then, where do you want people to go? And then we talk about that call to action as more of a relationship building process. And you use that through whatever, funnel you may be using, whatever online marketing you may be using to continue building relationship with that person. So they, in some way, either become a customer or become part of your tribe. We also cover what it looks like to make a targeting sheet, what it looks like to make a dream sheet, how you pitch podcasters in the right way so you don't piss us off, how you can actually find emails. There's a couple of really cool apps out there I use to find anybody out there's email so I can pitch the right person. And we also have strategies on how to write a good subject line so that people actually open your email. And then also promotional stuff. I give them the funnel template that I use. I give them some ways that I build what I call a content engine, something that's spitting out content over again and again and again to really create that momentum and get the most out of all those interviews.
Wow, that sounds
Sign me up.
Amazing.
Let's do it.
Well, where can people find out more about your course, about Command Your Brand? Of course, we'll be sure to include links to your podcast as well. Where's the best place for people to track you down?
Absolutely. So my website is jeremyryanslate.com. The course is going to be coming out very soon. It's not going to be out till the 12th of February. But that's going to be over at getinterviewedonpodcast.com. And then our company website is commandyourbrand.media.
Right. Wow, this has been jam-packed full of awesome information for our audience and for us too. We're excited for your course, and thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And I hope I was able to help your audience with at least one thing in their life today.
I'm sure you were. We will definitely share your information with them. And if they have any questions, I'm sure they'll connect with you. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. It's been awesome.
Thank you so much.
We hope you've enjoyed our interview with Jeremy. Be sure to check out our show notes to find out all about Jeremy and be sure to connect with him online. And if you want to continue the conversation, join us in our BLE Tribe on Facebook. That's bit.ly/BLE Tribe.
And if you are an entrepreneur looking to create residual income, scale your business, and really create a life and a business that fires you up, join us in Broke Ass to Badass, our signature 8-week course. We invite you to book a free call with us so we can learn more about what you're up to, what your big dreams are, and how we can support you on that journey. Book a call today at bestlifeever.buzz/apply.